Hi, I'm Oliver. I make electronic music as Mentat, and this is a breakdown of my track Signs, which is out now on Traum Schallplatten. This is the session for Signs in Ableton Live, and I'm just going to talk through a few of the key parts from when I was making it. So this track started off with some experimenting with some iPad synths. So this was Synth One on the iPad, just playing around with a really nice evolving texture, and then I also added another line from the Animoog as well, which was a really old iPad plugin, but it sounds really fantastic. You can do some good stuff in it. I run my iPad into Ableton Live using a plugin which is called Studiomux. So you can use that to connect up the iPad, you can sequence it, you can play it on your keyboard, run MIDI out to it, run audio back in, and it all goes in and out through the lightning cable, which is really cool, saves your audio interface inputs and works pretty well, integrates quite nicely, so worth picking that up. So I had these atmospherics kind of going on, and I decided to add in another part that was more of a hook. I usually try and start tracks with things that are going to be hooks, whether they're percussion or synths, but whatever's going to be unique to that track. I always used to build tracks with the drums and bass and kind of building from the bottom up, but I often find you can end up with a groove and you don't really know where it's going to go when you do that, so it's better to put some time and effort into what's the hook of the track going to be to begin with. Now, weirdly, this hook, which was a part that I came up with on my Rack synth, didn't end up in the original track. It stayed in the intro for a really long time, and then I ended up removing it, largely persuaded by Riley from Traum Records when we were looking at releasing this track. He just said it was just a bit busy and that the rest of the track was just deeper and darker, and you know, I agree with him having taken it out, but I often find it quite hard to remove things that I've spent a lot of time on. Anyway, that was originally in the beginning, kind of bringing the track in, but then it was removed a little bit later on. So one of the next parts I came up with was this particular line, which is a sequence on the Elektron Digitone. So it's a really nice hardware FM synth. It's also got one of the Elektron sequencers in it, and one of the things I like about it, apart from the fact that it sounds really cool and it's got a great FM synth engine, is that it's got this sequencer, and when you play with different sequencers, when you use them to come up with ideas, you come up with different things. They push you in certain directions, I think, and I like that. I like to be influenced a little bit by them, but also turn them into something of my own. I find with the Digitone, because it can do up to 4-bar sequences, but because it's got that 1 bar in front of you and it's got lots of randomization things that you can make a single bar do different things and be quite interesting, I tend to use it to get into smaller, shorter sequences like this, the kind of repeating sequences. So I had that sequence set up, and I had all of the other areas, added in some drums, added in some bass, and had quite a nice groove going. So that really got me started on the track. I played it on my piano style keyboard, so just sort of jammed and came up with that type of line, which is not the sort of thing I would come up with if I was programming a sequencer. Much more sustained, kind of meandering over a longer series of bars and so on. So just influenced me to come up with something different, and I programmed that sound on the Digitone, just really like it for those weird, otherworldly sounds, which is often the kind of sounds that got me into this type of music. So once I'd done that, I had a melody, I had a groove, I had really some of the core parts of the track. So I moved into arranging the track, and something that I often do for arranging is that I sketch it out first using some blank clips. So I've got a blank MIDI track here, and I've just put clips in which I've named, and then I've set them up as blocks running through the track. Sometimes I'll even do that when I've got an 8-bar loop or a 16-bar loop or whatever. I will turn the sound off and sketch out with these blocks what I think the arrangement should be, then drop in the various parts to sort of build that arrangement, and then only then listen to it. I find it's really easy to get stuck into listening to something over and over and over and not make very much progress on arrangement. So that's something I do to just force myself into arranging a track. It will change later on as I listen back to it, I'll make it better, but just trying to get a full track length arrangement sketched out, parts in place, then you've got something to work with. Then it's a case of kind of like a sculptor carving something out of a piece of stone rather than just sitting there and looking at it over and over and trying to decide what to do. So having done that arrangement, I realised it needed something a little bit more to kind of build up the track, so I came up with the chord parts, which I used the Diva for that, one of my favourite synth plugins. Now the thing about Diva is that it's been programmed, the presets, by some really amazing programmers, and some of them you start playing and they just sound great. Often though I find I want something a bit simpler in a track, so I've made a bunch of presets just based around the different instruments that are in there, and this was based on my Jupiter 8 preset, which is basically a kind of an init patch for a Jupiter 8 that you would pull up, and I use the Jupiter 8 a lot for chords. Sounds really, really nice. I'd love a real one, but I'd probably have to sell everything else in my studio to cover the costs of that one, so I'll stick to Diva. It does sound really good. So by that point, with some arrangement, I really had the core elements of the track that I wanted, and it was really close. But I always like to put in lots of extra details into tracks, sound design things, one-shots, stabs, things that will come in and just keep it really interesting, especially with this kind of music is deliberately quite repetitive and evolving, but you can put in these different bits. I've been hugely influenced by Jody Wisternoff and his work on Way Out West with that. You listen to the old Way Out West tracks, there's all sorts of bits and bobs that come in and out, and they all sound really nice. So for this one of the big elements I used for that was this kind of dub stab, which comes in the beginning. And that's really using an effect that I go for quite a lot. And that's using some external software. So what I did with that was I just loaded up a Contact plugin with a piano, and I routed that sound. Instead of being able to hear it, I routed it out using Soundflower, which is a way of routing audio around your system, into VCV Rack. So VCV Rack's a separate piece of software with modular stuff. It's based around a lot of Eurorack. And I ran that into a very well-known Eurorack module called Clouds. It's a granular synthesizer. It sort of crushes and messes around with the sound. It can sound very reverby or atmospheric. It can also sound very glitchy. And it's really cool in a modular system to be able to run modulation into there. So in this case LFOs, I had some quite slow moving low frequency oscillators running into some of the inputs, and that's just moving some of these knobs very slowly, but Clouds in particular really benefits from that type of movement within a sound. Now it's not very repeatable what's going on in there. I usually do tend to try and keep things running in software synths and plugins and as MIDI as much as I can, because I like to be able to go back and tweak the sound rather than rendering it to audio and being sort of stuck with it. But with this you do just have to hit record, play into it, and then capture the good bits and edit it and work out which bits you want to keep. So I've ended up with just an audio track with that one, but it's an audio track with various different bits that I'm using that I've chopped out. There are different parts to this, different variations. They're all the same chord playing, subtle variations though that come in at different parts of the track. This bit was a longer sequence that I liked, the others are more single stabs, and I bring them in and out to add to the atmospheres. Sometimes it's on the beat, sometimes it's off. I spend quite a long time playing around with those and chucking them, chopping them up, chucking them in different places. Same sort of technique I used with the vocals on my Blame Your Jeans remix, really throwing in different bits to keep the interest going through. that was largely the track. Obviously lots more work going into other bits, lots of details, but those were the main parts and how I started it, using different sequences, different plugins and synths to sort of influence the sound and influence the composition of it, and then it came together. That's how I made Signs. It's out now on Traum Schallplatten. It's part of the latest Tour de Traum compilation. If you want to jump straight to the track, you can go to mentataudio.com/signs, and there are links to all the different streaming and download services there. Check out my YouTube and my Facebook for more videos of breakdowns of tracks I've made and also remixes I've done. And if you want to know anything more about production, then just send me a message.